Hello everyone, and on behalf of the Community Library Project, I want to thank all of you. I think some of you are joining us from beyond India. Thank you so much for being part of the ongoing conversations about books and reading that we are having as part of TCLP's Free Library Festival. And I actually wanted to kick off this very special session by reading a short and very powerful excerpt passage, which some of you, I think, will be familiar with. It goes a little something like this. Revolution starts with knowing the alphabet. Freedom begins by knowing the alphabet. Emancipation lies in making sense of the world through the alphabet. Justice is established by writing words to fight against injustice. So let us start learning them. Let us learn to write them and imagine a beautiful world with them. So, this is an excerpt from this book, Flowers on the Grave of Caste, and it is written by our guest today, Yogesh Maitreya. He is a writer, he is a poet, he is a translator, a columnist, curator, and he is the founder, publisher at Panther's Paw Publication. In fact, just going to send you a link in the chat so that you can check out this later. He's a PhD researcher at the Tata Institute at TISS. He knows intimately what kinds of obstacles exist, to bring such stories, themes, and anti-caste literature onto mainstream bookshelves. So just a small, in the story that I quoted from, it's called Re-Evolution. The narrator at one point undertakes a journey on foot from Aurangabad to Bid in Maharashtra, and he walks the entire 120 kilometers, and he's tired and he's exhausted, and he comes upon a tea stall in the middle of his journey, where he is not only welcomed by the tea stall owner, who gives him sustenance without charging him a single penny. But also the narrator finds portraits of Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and the Buddha on the walls of the tea stall. And in the story, this rejuvenates him, despite all of the pain and the exhaustion of having walked a long, long way. And I sincerely hope that today's session will have the same effect on all of us, especially those of us who think deeply about the power of books and the power of reading. So just some house rules, just while Yogesh is speaking, let's all be on mute. And in the last 20 minutes of the session, we'll open it up for questions. So if you have any thoughts in the meanwhile, please feel free to use the chat section. I'll be taking a look at it towards the end of the session, and we'll get into a more interactive thing. This session is also being recorded, just so all of you know. So thank you so much, and over to you, Yogesh. Welcome.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Uh, um, I don't know, like I'm not very much prepared about it. I've been, caught up with a few things for a few months now. So just, but when Bhavna, emailed me and I know about the community library project, and the books are at the center of it. So I can't say no to books or anything which is related to books. So I was like, okay, like I'll do that. So it takes I didn't take note and all, but it took reflection, or thinking on the past, to and the uh, you know so I can talk on the subject of today's session, or like maybe workshop or whatever we can call it. But it is about the histories and the stories, and then identities. So I think who are the people who are involved with all these things, when we read as a reader, so the first thing we see, or if I tell you my experience about, identity. So when I started, I was not my family or my background has not been something where books were available very easily. So, the first novel of my life, when I have read it completely, when I was 26, so like, 9 years back. Uh, so I'm a very late reader, but like having gone through all these years without reading, as in like not reading like newspaper or the school stuff or the college stuff we have, which is something imposed on us, but reading in order to find something, you know or developing that quest to find yourself or find meaning to your life while you are reading, it is something, a process which can which can be triggered only when you are consciously reading something in order to find your story into that. Now I was I was so fascinated about this English language, because English is not a language in India. It is like a status quo or prestige, or if you go to like in metro cities, in any, I think in any states, if you go to like posh cafes or even Starbucks, people talk in English, like they may be Kannadigas, they may be Marathi, they may be Hindi, but like, so I was like maybe 20, 15 years back, the English came, or I was encountered with this language with a kind of a fascination, like uh, only the people who speak these are intelligent, or they are supposed to be knowledgeable and all these things. So it was about the status quo. So English was not the language I started to read with, like it was status quo fascination. I wanted to belong there. Now when I read first novel, like which was Charles Dickens' Great Expectation, the mention of it is in that book also, like Flowers on the Grave of Caste. So I was in fascination of this language. I was reading this story, but somewhere like I spent 3 months reading that one novel, understanding it as a story, not only as a language. And I was like, okay, like there is something universal between all of us, and those things are feelings of everything or all kinds, and the emotions of all kinds. So when I was reading that novel, I can relate to something in it, but I was like, it is not my story. I once I when I was done with this a novel or reading it, I was like, there was a sense in me that I somewhere I don't belong here, although I can associate with some parts of the story. The emotions are like, it's something, emotion is a universal element, feeling is an universal element, but somewhere I don't belong to these particular stories, because the story comes from the history which I don't belong, or I don't share that history. Now that was something which changed my perspective to read stories or whatever narratives which are there in English language. Now when I began with reading English novels, or the literature, broadly, to speak it broadly, when I began reading English literature from India, I felt the same sense, that I don't belong here. But I also felt one thing, that these stories are somewhere in negation of my life. You know, these stories are coming from the imagination which has erased me as an imagination in stories. Like I read Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things. Like I almost read it 3 times, because like for me someone like who never studied in English medium, who never went to convent or college, which is like English speaking college, nothing like that. For me to understand that, I invested time into that. I invested labor into understanding that particular book for me, the book has never been a matter of, feeling joy or feeling refreshed, or just, for me it is kind of, it is an engagement, it is a labor I'm investing in order to understand the complex reality between or around me. Now when I, when I was reading, when I was done with reading of Arundhati Roy's God of Small Thing, and there is small character Veluta, you know, who is an untouchable character, and that character was there, but always in background, always as if it doesn't have a subjectivity, and it came as a, the object, that maybe some of you won't agree with me, but to me it appears that, okay, like this is coming, I mean, Veluta seems to have no subjectivity, no history, no, he seemed to have no story into that, although he's a character of, although he's a part of this novel. So the end of this novel is very, it's very enigmatic in a sense that, when I was reading, when I talked about this novel to with a few of my friend, couple of my friends, I mean, who read this or who were into reading, they seem to have, this influence of critic, like, or the other people praised about this, but I somewhere, like, something was poking me, something was like, making me uncomfortable about this. Then I moved on to other writings, like maybe like the only novel by Pankaj Mishra, The Romantics. So I read that novel, and I was like, my friend, one of my friend who suggested me, said that you should read this novel, and I really liked that when I read it, because it was about, like, I read it when, because I could feel related to that, because I was like of the same age when the of the protagonist of that novel, and there is a theme of poetry, Brahmin becoming poor, and it's a story of a poor Brahmin, and that poverty or kind of a thing, like, was very much appealing to me, or I was like, it keeps reader engaged with its stories. But I was like, after a few years, when I started, not a few years, just immediately after 1 or 2 years, when I was, until I was reading only English stories in India or English literature, I started reading Dalit literature very consciously. I mean, there was Dalit literature around us all the time, as a movement, as a, there were people, there were writers, like, but I did not consciously invested my time into that, because I thought, like, I know this, but knowing your story or knowing your history through stories is miraculous. I won't say miraculous, but it's a process which is, which is filled with lot of discoveries. You discover a meaning to your existence. You not only discover meaning to your existence, but you discover meaning to the whole history you belong to, the history which is erased from you. Now, when I was reading one language, or when I was reading one literature, or the literature which is which is so written by a close knitted community like a Brahmin or Savarnas, and we know that English literature in India is nothing but a Savarna and Brahmin literature. Even so far, I mean, it might change, the scenario might change, but so far English literature in India is nothing but a Brahmin literature, because it, not only because it is written by these people, but it somewhere, advocates the imagination or the aesthetics or the, the value principles of their lives, not the lives of the people. And the one thing which is missing in their novel is the element of justice. Now, the element of justice is very important in your story. I don't know about the other societies because I don't belong there. I just read them and I just have their imagination. But if I talk about India, element of justice in literature, in whatever way you are writing it, in whatever style you are writing in, like in whatever, with whatever freedom you are writing with. I think the if we are not going to make sure that the element of justice with the element of aesthetic will be there in our stories, I don't think so that if that element of justice is missing from the element of aesthetics from our stories, we are going to create the society of fascist. I think leaders are not fascist, they come from us. We construct them. So if the leader is fascist, we, so as a society collectively is a fascist society. So I don't feel wonder about like whatever is happening now. I don't need to mention explicitly what is happening. All of us are aware about it, but I hold us responsible. We collectively made the blunder. We collectively gave rise to whatever is like now affecting our lives. So we should think about ourselves. Now how can literature, or like uh, this has happened if we understand like the kind of history. If you go back to the college, if you go back to, if some of us are like some of us may have studied history as a subject, as a discipline. I never had, but like as a reader, I read some books of history, like maybe the history of colonization, history of racism, history of this and that. Like in that sense, uh, I if I tell you from my experience that uh, in college I was never Ambedkar was never a part of history, not only in college but not in school also. And it is not about only about Ambedkar, or I belong to the community belong to, and that is why I'm saying, because I'm not saying because of this, but I'm saying that his contribution to uh, you know uh, to form the society which is based on equality, liberty and fraternity is undeniable. It's something like it's inevitably unavoidable. But we as a society of people who hate every other person who is not from our caste is a fascist society. So we don't feel we don't feel sad when we are denying the truth. It's a denying the truth is the practice which is every day done in the caste society. So sometimes we do it subconsciously. Now this subconscious, when it gives rise to a story, maybe like story in any form, like visual or textual, maybe it's a poem or whatever it is, it gives rise, or it gives birth to a kind of a story which again thrust in our mind the kind of the idea of a society which is you know uh, normalized with the existence of caste. The societies, the stories which do not abnormalized and problematize the existence of caste are the stories which create the fascist societies. Now, in democracy, it is people who give rise to anything. Now, we in India, we do not, or we did not give them real stories or real histories to read. And this is not in 2020. Ever since the India project has started, 47, then Constitution came 49, then so on, like when we were developing IITs and IIMs and AIMS, all these premier institutions, we were somewhere not focusing on the fundamental education. you know and now if you understand the history of India in terms of education, until late until early 90s, All the people who were benefited by IITs, IIM, 99% people were Savarnas. Majority of them are Brahmins across India, all premier IITs, all premium IIMs, AIMs, all these people. Now, until 1990, they were the whole and sole beneficiary of all these things. Now, imagine, and also about all these central institutions like maybe JNU and all other things. In our imagination today now, we do not have any discourse emerged from state local universities. We talk about all these premier institutions which are nothing but uh, a project to create homogenize history of India as an imagination or in imagination. Maybe it's in non-fiction or maybe in fiction, but India is not a homogeneous state. Each caste, let us say there are 5,000 castes, maybe there may be more, there may be less, like plus and minus. But if you say that there are 5,000 castes, which means that we have 5,000 histories, which means that we have 5,000 stories, which means that we have 5,000 variety of arguments which can oppose to the idea of India, like in a scale of the idea. If this idea is benefiting someone, they want, but if this idea is benefiting majority, they will, you know and then there are different languages. Northeast means the North Indian people. I call them Northeast. Northeast don't understand. They hardly try to understand or learn South Indian languages. Now the history of I also don't can't read South Indian languages, but I read their literature in translation. So I make sure that at least I read something from some state, so that I will be connected with these people through literary imaginations. But these people, like the Hindi is going somewhere. Hindi is a homogenization project which are going to kill a lot of histories and stories. So this is the first problem of this language. Now, if you are imposing this Hindi imagination on the minds of people, you are going to kill lot of histories, and consequently you are going to kill lot of stories, and subsequently you are going to create the troops or the battalions of the people who are going to fascist society. I'm not saying leaders, society. Now, when there have been the existence of premier institutions in India who are creating homogenized form of stories, we as a society see our identities in relation to them, not in isolation with them. Our identity, my identity is like, as far as, because I have been thinking, I grew up like maybe some of you also grow up watching Bollywood movies, like Hindi movies. So these movies, I mean, movies also a story, in a visual form. So uh, I like them. While I was growing, I was a child, I was introduced to that. I was introduced to Bollywood stories, and those who are introduced to Bollywood movies from early age, especially male, they become more solid patriarchal, or solid patriarchal people, solid patriarchal figures, maybe and many times subconsciously. Now these Bollywood movies, what I when the time when I started reading Dalit literature, or the stories, my people or the people from my community or the other caste but the untouchable communities, uh, when I read Om Prakash Valmiki's Jutan from North India, when I was reading N.D. Rajkumar's poetry from Tamil Nadu, when I was reading S. Joseph poems or Malayali stories in English translation from Malayalam, when I read Telugu poets in English translation, when I read short story writer from Kannada and poets from Kannada in English translation, I was like, I was so shocked to uh, imagine the fact that these people are not in dominant, or they don't belong to the people's imagination yet. People, some of the people, those who are northeast, those who are good, they call themselves, like they studied in big institutions, or maybe like premier colleges, like all these elite colleges, like Miranda, Xavier's, LSR and blah blah things, DU and JNU and all. I mentioned these South Indian writers with them, and they hardly seem to have any idea about it. Like, so it's like they force, or they disseminate, even to speak in a theoretical sense, like they disseminate, they spread, they make sure that they will spread their their stories to the people, and meantime they will hide other people's histories by providing people a kind of a fake and the constructed idea of society. Bollywood is a fake and constructed idea of a society. No one of us, like, I don't think so that 90% of Indian society belong to that or feel associated with them. And maybe it is because of we seem to have so much of things to take care in our everyday life. We think that these movies are somewhere, we find a kind of a 3 hours or 2 hours of entertainment, and that's what we need. No, we don't need that. you know if you know why you don't need, because whatever is happening right now, it is, indirectly, it is, everything is connected with the kind of movies we are consuming as viewers. Imagine in Bollywood movies, there is always one hero who saves, right? Who saves people in from all kinds of rubbish, all kinds of stupid. Now this is what people also want in politics, right? Somebody saying, I'll do this, I'll do that, and this people is ignorant. He fake his caste certificates. He doesn't have any history to going to college, and no one knows any fact. But we don't care about it. We want somebody, like, who will go on the stage, and who will give us a kind of a hope. So now, let us face that then. Let us face the consequence of being. So we are not actually, and in lot are the nature of society or the caste society is such that we rarely provide people time to read. Majority of us can't afford to read. Reading is leisure, and more than it is leisure, it is a privilege. Not all of us have this privilege. Now, in order to make this privilege as a part of people's life or everyday life, now we have this Marxist theory, they call it, like, Marx says that you should work equally, but you should also spend time in the artistic thing, the same similar amount of time, because there are few things you need in life. You need to work to sustain, but you also need sleep to, for your biological mental well-being. But you also need same amount of time to uh, nourish your mind, because you are living in the society and you are living in relation with the people. Now that is what Ambedkar says. He says that the ultimate goal of the human life is to, it's to nourish our own mind, and free our mind from all these prejudices. And he calls it enlightenment, in a sense. And he understands enlightenment in that particular sense. And in that sense, he says very pragmatically that this is what a Prabuddha Bharat, the enlightenment India, will look like when all of them will have scope to spend some time. in some kind of an artistic thing by which they will work on their mind in order to nourish it imaginatively, not only as a mind as is a biological element, but imaginatively, because that will improve our relation with each other, that will erase or demolish the prejudices we have, that will demolish the hate we have. And when hate is gone, there is a space for love to be developed. Now these people, like I read their lot of things, their politics and philosophy, but I understand them as someone who are like deeply of the opinion that people should read. I mean, Ambedkar's entire life is like an example. Like, if you want to be reader, you should be reader like them. There is no single reader. There is no single politician in India from the past till now looking at whom you inspire to read. There is only one, that is Ambedkar. And I don't think so. I mean, I can proudly say that, like, when you no Savarna reader, no Savarna politician advocated the need of people reading it. I mean, it was only Ambedkar. Now, if these people, when I think about this thing in relation, like history, story, identities. Now, if we talk about first two, like sometimes stories also create a kind of history and in our mind. Some stories when they are written from the privileged perspective, or the people who are privileged, who have less and lesser connection uh, with the large society. I think they end up creating the history which nobody belongs to, you know. So that is the reason, like, we lot of people do not have histories here, now a lot of people from Bahujan category. There are lots of caste, thousands of caste in Bahujan categories also. I mean, Dalit as a category, we understand that the people who coming from ex untouchable background. So the background of being an untouchable or having that history is very exclusive. No one can share but that person, and that is why that person knows and feels. In a way, that person knows and feel. Now a lot of Bahujan people are also trying to write their own stories, but they do not have any means or any resource other than their parents, who can tell them the history of their parents or their previous generation. Now if some of our majority of our parents are not even educated, they did not go to the college, what kind of histories we are going to imagine? We can't imagine our history. We cannot know our history just by imagination. We need to create narratives of our generation, you know uh, but uh, and that is where the importance of Dalit literature comes, because Dalit literature has been written by the particular generation who belong to that who belong to particular time of history. you know they not only wrote about their past, but they also wrote about their, and they have been writing about what is happening in the present time. Now lot of time we see that there was a flourishing wave. There was a like a powerful wave of new narratives from Dalit literature, or within the tradition of Dalit literature, has been emerged or the produce till late 1990s. Now for last 15 or 20 years, we don't see much Dalit literature. Although in this last 20 years, a lot of people from our community or my background are, or they have been privileged to, or have access to English education. But we see that the stories and the histories which are produced in vernacular languages are more genuine, are more honest than the histories and the stories which are produced in English. So somewhere like I also be very cautious when I read something by any English writer in India, because I whatever experience I have of them is something like they don't know the society very well. In fact, they don't have connection with the society. If you don't have connection with the society, how can you going to have imagination of that person as a character in your story? I mean, which is simply impossible. You can't know person just simply by imagining about that person. You need to at least have some idea about his historical connections. And because if you know his history, you will know the forms of his, or the anatomy of his emotions, his feelings, his vision. So you are not creating character, so that lot of time English writers in India, they create Dalit Bahujan character to support their regressive ideas of the society, or the vision they have about society. Now, I have this hunch that identities are always created by the political regime, which needs some kind of identity for their benefit, for them to survive. Now, politics also work in relation with with the ongoing trend of stories, the people who are writing the stories, because they know that stories can also create opinion, you know and so it is not that politicians are the fool people. They are very smart. If they are not smart, they won't be ruling us. They won't be ruling the authors and intellectuals and philosophers. Politicians are much smarter than every one of them combined, because they also make sure that what kind of stories and movies and histories are being produced during their regimes. One of the example is when Obama was there in America as a president, Django Unchained came, right? So that movie did not come before that, but it came during black presidents, when America had a black president. You know, so these are a few hunch. These are few hunch, and if you understand what kind of narratives are there, also like people are writing. Okay, there is a freedom of choice, freedom of writing, and everything. But for last year, we have also like a lot of mainstream medias ended up creating stories which are supportive to this generation, which means that we need to hear from the people now who never been heard in public imagination, which means that we need to create readers who will be who will who will be in the quest of their identities, their histories, who will not only just read what we give them, but who will also be explorer in terms of their reading choices. Because when a reader doesn't have a choice and doesn't have a capacity to buy the or to have access to the stories, he or she is dependent on what we offer or give them, which means that we must make sure that in order to create the society, the mentally healthy society, the society which will believe on love, practice it, believe on compassion, believe on equality, liberty, not only believe, but strive to live everyday life, or at least make sure that this is how the life should be imagined, not the what politicians are saying. For that reason, we need to make sure that we need to produce the stories, or encourage people from various communities to write about their narratives, write about their stories, no matter in what way they write, but just give them a freedom to write about it, because that is how we are going to communicate with each other so far. And after this moment, if we need to understand, if we need to if we need to understand the purpose of the stories we write, or we publish or we imagine, so we need to also understand the the kind of histories from which we are erased. In my this first short story collection, Flowers on the Grave of Caste, I deliberately did not use or any kind of frameworks with which stories in India in English have been written now. So I just shut everything down. I the name of my characters are from Dalit and Buddhist history. I did not care about the climax and the content, how it starts and how it will finish. I just I had my people in front of my eyes, and I was like, how honestly, how genuinely, but how in what way I can transcend their lives through literature, because that is the purpose of literature, to transcend the meanings or the existence of people who are erased from the histories. So that with that purpose, I have written Flowers on the Grave of Caste, and I hope that maybe like people in understanding it in whatever way it can. And I have spoken enough of this. And I don't know like in what way I managed to deal with the subject of today's workshop or the session, but I'm sure that it is meaningful to those who are listening to it.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. I invite everyone who is listening and who's part of this conversation to please post their thoughts and their comments in the chat box so that I can start addressing them to Yogesh. Um, in fact, until everybody starts typing in, I just wanted to ask Yogesh, because like you have already mentioned in this talk, and you have also written a lot about it. You've addressed how there is gatekeeping that surrounds especially the use of English language. And we have also seen at our library with all of our young thinkers and people who want to express themselves in the English language, that this correct usage of English grammar is often used as an excuse to exclude, without actually hearing or reading or thinking about what that person is trying to express. And I think it's a big loss for language also, because language grows and evolves and has color and flavor when different kinds of voices use the language to express themselves. And so I was very curious to know how, like, if you had advice to give to budding writers who are like our members, what would you say about, if they want to write in English, they should continue to write in English, or what would be your advice in that sense?
See this tonality of the language is some. I'm not a linguist, but I was for long time I was skeptical about if I'm speaking any word from English correctly. Now I was like, I started to think that who is the reference of correct pronunciation of English for me. Is it British or is it American or Black American or maybe Asian American or maybe Brahmins in India or maybe Shashi Tharoor? I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. It's stupid. I also worked in call center, by the way, for a short time, and I like they're training people in accent. And now I think about it, it is very stupid. You can it will be your passion to be or to write in this particular language, English. You may love it. You want, if you, for whatever reason, you want to pursue this language, just do it, like speak in whatever way you want, because the people because South Indians or the people from South, they, somebody from vernacular background from South India may speak English different than the South Indian who is educated in convent. So there are multiple realities, tonalities, and tonalities are about caste, you know. uh, in my the region where I am from, like, you know, my community is like extendable community, like then we became Buddhist. But the same community, if I go to the other parts of Maharashtra, they speak language so softly, like, you know, sweetly. And when we speak, we are like, you know, people irritate, like, oh, you know, they get irritated. We speak rough, we speak loudly. So that happens when I speak in other language also, like, you know, this is my attitude. The language is in my attitude, there is no attitude in language, you know. So because attitude is me, right? If language is changing my history or my story, then that language is very dangerous for me. So I should accommodate that language to, you know, project or make my story or my history shareable to more number of people. You know, I should not be governed by the language. I should govern the language, because people are important, not languages. You know, like people, there are people without languages of any kind of languages, but we live, right?
Right.
And there were no languages, people are living. But since we as a miraculous invention of this civilization, human civilization, we have variety of languages. We need to make sure that what is the use of language in our life. You know, a lot of some people use language to um, put down people, you know. They don't in my university, I've been studying in TISS Bombay, uh, where instruction of medium is, you know, like people, professors are, they are like, you know, okay, I mean, they also explain in Hindi, or mostly in Hindi, you know, like that's again problematic. Why? But anyway, like English and Hindi. Now when it comes to write submission or you know, assignments, we do not have choice but English. Now somebody is thinking so big, so beautifully, his thoughts are formed in the language he's grown up with, or maybe his mother tongue. Now you are asking that person to articulate his mind in a language he just newly reading it, which means that of course he will not up to the mark, right? Because language is also I already said it's an investment, right? It's a labor to be engaged with the book. You know, it's an investment, it's an engagement, it's a laborious process. The fruits take time to, you know, reap, right? So that is how many of the people in people from various parts of the world, India, when they go to premier institutions, they are made to feel inferior. Not because they are not inferior. They have their own stories, their histories, their own thought processes, their own emotions, their own ideas of looking at life. But everybody, we can't force everybody to, you know, show in English, you know.
Right.
So uh, that is one thing.
Um,
We have two questions, right?
yeah, in fact, I was just going to read that out. Ridula is asking, to what extent is English a language of liberation in the context of what you described as hegemony of Hindi?
Now, how what is liberation? I'm very skeptical about all these big words: liberation, revolution, you know, freedom, azadi. I mean, although I use that, but uh, I there is this skepticism, not skepticism, but I have an experience of it. Like there is this Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan, you know. Now, what is Hindi? There is nothing called Hindi, you know. First of all, if we know the history of languages in India and how they are developed, how they came into existence, is there anything called Hindi? There were Maithilis, there were Bhojpuris, there were Awadhis, there was Magadhis. Then Mughals came, they brought Persian. Then some things mixed up, it become Urdu, right? Where from Hindi came, you know, there is nothing called Hindi, but it is a construction now, right? Uh, if you imagine if you know the history, political history of India, like when Savarkar or Golwalkar came, like they wrote Hindutva. So in democratic India, Brahmins felt that their hegemony is going to be finished now because people got the right to choose, right? And who will care about, and we know that after assassination of Mahatma Gandhi ji, how people used to look at Brahmins, you know. So they came up with this idea of, like, we need to people bring under one umbrella, so let us make everybody Hindu. They have a Hindi language, even though they didn't. in 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 um in the North Belt, people have, like, these languages called Magadhis, Awadhis, Bhojpuris, and so on and so forth. And this history, or this region also has a history of Mughals settled there, disseminating their languages. There is nothing on Hindi. Hindi is a Brahmin project, first of all. Now, English is a colonization, but it happened in the lives of Dalits and Bahujan. It has given them scope to be educated, right? There are a lot of untouchable caste and some Bahujan caste across India, and even in North India. They were in the British Army. Britishers taught them alphabets, Again to my story, Britishers taught them alphabets, and alphabets of Hindi, alphabets of English and all. So the only thing is that the Dalit Bahujan history is not prominently written in English. So we can't say that we can associate liberation with English. The only liberation we can imagine when we are going to know and write the history or write our stories in a language which our grandfathers belong to. None of us, our grandfather must have heard about. I think my grandfather did not have any inkling of Hindi, also of the all these new gods and all. So the history of India is not like, first of all, Hindi is a Brahmin project, and as I think Mrudula, right?
Yes.
That to what extent is English a language of liberation? I think it depends on what we understand as liberation, right? What is means liberal, liberated. I feel liberal. I feel liberated. Feeling liberal is different than feeling liberated. Liberated may be for you having a lot of choices to lead your life in a way you want, right? Or to travel where you want, to read what you want, to wear whatever you want. It's a position to exercise the choices, right? Now, does English as a language have or has this scope for you to create or tell your story to people in a way you want? If it is, then I think it is a liberation for you. And also liberation comes when you share your story with maximum number of people, you know so for me personally, I've been writing in English. I've been sharing my literature in English, and I think I reach beyond, maybe not in a large scale, but to few people in various parts of India, like people in Kerala or Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, people in Karnataka, people in Maharashtra, people in Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, all the way from Jammu and Kashmir. They're buying my stories. They are asking for my books and all. Books from Panthers Paw. So I think and I have been writing which my people are, I have been producing which my people are writing, so I read their stories. I know where it is coming from. So in that sense that for us, I mean, yes, this is a liberation for us. Like for untouchables, liberation has a very different context.
Um, right.
So that is one thing, Mrudula. I guess I hope like you got some idea about what I understand about this. Next is Neha.
Neha has asked. She has asked, I would like to understand how we can approach Dalit history while belonging to the dominant caste, so-called dominant caste.
Well, this question is like recurring to all of my talks. I think it is a genuine question. It is something like people want to be aligned with that. But if you belong to dominant caste, write the history of your dominant caste and the history of dominance, which nobody has written about from dominant caste. Is there any writer from dominant caste who has written about the history of dominant caste or their dominance? No, right? The good, the best, and the honest approach to Dalit history is to write or expose the history which erased the Dalit history. And it is only done by the dominance of the person from the dominant caste. So Sashi Tarun does not write about the Brahmins from the operations of like the or the hypocrisies of Brahmins from Kerala and all. So maybe he writes about all this colonization and blah blah stuff. Or neither maybe like North Indian writers don't write about it. So I think Neha, you got my answer. Like the the best approach to Dalit history while belonging to dominant caste is to write or the expose the history of dominance of the dominant caste person. Now, so this is the answer to that.
So Stuti asked, sorry, I'm sorry, please.
Dominant caste people can't do anything for us. I'm not saying that I'm not denying their agency, but please, it is you have a genuine feeling of alliance to be a part of the movement, and you are a part of movement as long as you are honest with accepting your privilege and the dominance. You can't just get away by saying dominant caste. You need to understand I am dominant, and for that matter, I need to write about it.
So Stuti has a comment coming in. Dear Yogesh, you rightly pointed out in Ambedkarism in art and aesthetics, in the context of introducing readers to the poetry of Sunil Abhiman Auchar, that even in the domain of translation of Ambedkarite and Dalit literature into English, there exists gatekeeping and prejudice on the part of Brahmanized publishers. So, in a society where social capital determines who is heard and who isn't, how does a Bahujan artist or writer survive? Is more Bahujan owned platforms or publishing houses the answer?
Yes, there is no you cannot feel safe, secure, protected in other people's home, right? Home is something you belong to, right? You feel protected. So you, no matter how broken your home right now, you need to make your home solid. You need to create your construct your home newly. You need to strive for that. You need to labor for creating whatever platform. It may take years. You may not even taste the benefit of it, but your next generation, but create it. Because your quest for liberation is a threat to dominant caste people, so they will never allow you, they will never allow you to be unequal or as equal to them. They will never allow you to dominate the business they have, the business of constructing false stories and histories. So if you are a Dalit Bahujan artist, create your platform no matter how long, because our immediate ancestors did not, as far as I understand, I respect their everything, and because of them like we exist. But and they had their own problems, but we belong to a kind of a millennial generation and we are exposed to this social media, this global outbreak of technology and all these things, and the opening of or the excess of knowledge or the world literature, we need to emphasize on creating, creation, not repetition. We so far we have been repeating, we have been living life of a repetition. Now we need to understand the value and the impact and the significance of creation. To create something, create your story, no matter how it will appear to people, no matter how they will see. Create your own platform, no matter how small it is, how big it is. Strive for it. There should be thousands of Dalit publishers, there should be thousands of Dalit Bahujan platforms from which we can write. Then only we will be managed to create an opinion which is an opinion for the equal, liberal, fraternal, just, compassionate, lovable world. So yes, I mean, that is, so far I see that is the only option.
Bhavna has a question. I'll ask that before I tell you this. There is a comment that's come in from Vidula, but I'll ask the question first from Bhavna. I always have this question of how we Dalit, whose voices have been silenced throughout ages, will have the courage and confidence to express and represent ourselves and our culture and history in this Savarna dominated society.
Okay, Bhavna says, I always have this question of how we Dalit, whose voices have been silenced throughout ages, will have the courage and confidence, uh, express and represent ourselves, our culture, and history in this. Have the courage, okay, like it is about like how we will be capable of, see, see, this is like a very like when we say, for ages, it is not ages, like, if you go back, like maybe like, 500 years back in the history, we may be doing something really really good. We may be our ancestors may be artisans, they may be artists, they may be musicians, right? They may be like, like, because the cruelty of caste, no, the unimaginable cruelty of caste has a context of women's liberation in India. Before Buddha's time, there was caste system, right? And people were like, following the caste norms. When Buddhism started becoming popular, this is Ambedkar's history, this is Ambedkar's theory, or the theory he has given. When Buddhism has become popular, and it has opened up the gate for women to join the Sangha and to live the life they want, pursue the intellectual life. They have this, if you get these theory gathas. The gathas are the poetic expressions of women, Buddhist women, from, all over India, Buddhist women monk. You will understand the kind of sexual, mental, intellectual liberation these women from across the caste found when they joined Buddha Sangha. Now, Manu saw that this is a threat for Brahmin hegemony. Now, if woman who is going to do this, who has this natural, biological, uh, what do you say, of a fact that she can bear the child, the hair of the family, takes birth in her womb. So if we stop her, if we prohibit her, if we control her, we can control the liberation of upcoming generations. By keeping women in one caste, we can keep the entire civilization in future in one caste, in their own caste. So that is how he has rigidified and made these caste norms more cruel. Now, at one point, we Dalit Bahujan also had the histories of liberation and all. Now, in the recent history, after the partition of 1947, and they have these question of like, who is represented in popular history, in stories, in literature, and who has in also in movies and in the public opinion and all. It is because like we somewhere like lacked creating our own resources. you know lot of us like newly started our lives in the India project, after 1947. Now how today, if we can have to have courage to write our stories, or maybe like to represent ourselves, I think it is very much important to know who you are by caste wise. As in, Dalits have a lot of castes, like lot of castes, subcastes, their history, the language history, their occupational history. So you should know about the history of your family, like they may be having particular occupation. So once you know your roots, right, the confidence comes in you. And once you know that your roots or your history is erased, your roots are chopped off by whom, you gain this confidence, because then you start to advocate your own idea of life. So to know the history is very important, to have the courage or the confidence to represent ourselves. So always, like think about the idea of your parents they have about the society. They may have a different idea, or maybe more liberately, more emancipatory ideas of the life, which the book cannot give you. Books are deceiving sometimes. So you should also make sure that whom you are reading, and you should also know the history of the, the identity of the reader, or the, sorry, the writer, and from what perspective he or she is writing. Because in India everything deceives, even education deceives, even science deceives. So you should know that from whom this thing is coming. So the first thing, like when like I meet somebody, I try to, somebody try to communicate with me, like, or to have a conversation. I always ask, no, with their name and all. I always ask, what caste do you belong to? For them it is a dangerous question. They never heard. Somebody is asking my caste also. I already, I mean, a lot of people who know me, they already know me, what I am and what caste I belong to. So if a lot of people meet me, they are new to me, I always ask, even if they are meeting me first time, like, what caste do you belong to? Because I should know what you're talking about. Are you talking about the tongue or the language of Brahmins, or are you talking in your own language? There may be a Bahujan candidate, there may be a Bahujan person, but he may talk like a Brahmin. So I should know, who is he, who she is he. And I was like, okay, why don't you talk about your caste history, rather than giving me something which Brahmin created. So they don't have answers, and that is why when they don't have answer, they feel, somewhere lacking. When you know about who you are, no, that is a miraculous thing. It's an emancipation. And that is the reason, like that is the biggest legacy, biggest contribution, biggest inheritance I got from Manchester, because they have written their literature. you know and I mean, that is the reason I'm talking what I'm talking, or how I am talking. So Bhavna, so knowing your history is very important. Deal with your grandparents if they are, they are around you, your parents, you know to understand the location of where you coming from and all. This is liberatory, this is far liberatory than 10 books together.
I would just like to read a comment that is coming from Ridula. Your book, Flowers on the Grave of Caste, creates an alternative to the Savarna world, one in which a community references itself in its search for meaning. In contrast, mainstream literature's references are from Savarna culture, This is seen, for example, in characters whose names are drawn from Buddhism, I think, in your book. Yet this alternative universe has Savarna characters and struggles that have to do with real world struggles of falling in and out of love, for example. There is a remarkable tension between this beautiful world and the world of oppression, which makes for a story that compels the reader's attention while serving the need of literature of commitment to find a believable alternative. For me, this is the achievement of Flowers, this vision of a delicate but believable alternative. And there's a continuation to this where she says, I think for anyone who wants to write against oppression, the challenge is finding an alternative vision of world. Who are the writers you read and who inform your writing?
Oh, thank you, Mridula. Uh, I I try to read lot of Dalit Bahujan writers from other states, because I grew up in Maharashtra, like in my region, Marathi is not Marathi but Waradi. We speak write in different ways. Here there are Dalit writers. I have been engaging with them for in dialoguing with them personally for years now. So my vision what informs my writing or my imagination, literary imagination, are a lot of things, because now I try to read something fiction, non-fiction, alternatively, also, like, since I'm doing this PhD things, like PhD business, so I also tend to write, have to read some theories and all. But mostly, like, I rely on marginalized people's literature across out of my state and across the world, like uh, I read Latin American literature, of course, which are available in English. The black writers, how the Jewish writers. I just finished. I finished one. Philip Roth's Patrimony. Now I'm reading another Jewish writer called Saul Bellow. They are white, but Jewish people, they have their own history in America. Like white Americans, they have, like black Americans, they have, like Latin American people, they have. uh, I also have this Vietnamese writer. I mean, I'm sorry, but his name I can't pronounce. But I'm also reading the South Asian literature, like this Hong Kong, Malaysia, especially people from, like, this, this earlier, which was like somewhere like a part of a Chinese civilization. So I also try to read, then there are, so I read variety of things. Sometimes I'm not particular about what I read, but I also since I have privilege to meet Dalit writers in person and dialogue with them, so everything like this inform or guide my vision, my literary imagination.
There's some other comments over here, but I think it's 3:15. So I just wanted to ask you, as a librarian, more than anything else, that for us who are working in free libraries, the way you are doing the work of publishing, we feel it is our responsibility to make sure that all kinds of stories and histories have are going to the hands of everybody who would probably not have had access to those stories and histories if it weren't for free libraries. So I think even the fact that we don't have free libraries in this country currently says a lot about what a casteist society there is. And I just want to make a small aside, because I am Savarna, and somebody in the comments has talked about how talking about caste itself is a divisive thing. I would just like to sort of, Yogesh, take a small moment as a Savarna to say that we are so ignorant about our own history, as Yogesh said, and about how we have oppressed so many people, that I think first, before we say that people who talk about anti-caste stories or histories are dividing society, I think we must first go back and study our own history of oppression, because there is no such division that is happening when we talk about caste in this country and caste oppression in this country. So now I'd like to come back. Sorry, Yogesh, I just had to make that
Yeah,
comment.
no worries.
Please, can you just talk a little bit about, like, even the relationship between publishers and libraries, from the point of view of the work you're doing, and we'll
Uh,
close after that.
See, like in some 12 years back, when I was like, when I was initiated into reading, I just wanted to read, uh, uh, in fact, like I'm writing this in my memoir. My memoir will be published next year. So not by Panthers Paw, but other publisher. Um, I mean, this gives me a scope to reflect about, like, when I started as a reader, I obviously didn't have money actually. So I always, I had one friend, and now, like, he's a Dalit, and Dalit Buddhist. He came from London. He shifted to Nagpur, and then he had lot of books with him, like, lot of foreign books. And I was like, it's like a treasure. So I befriended with him. You know, the one of the dominant reason was that he had a book. He had lots of books. He had like a kind of a small library. And when you really want to read something, when you don't know, when you want to make sense of the world around you by reading, uh, I think reading requires time. It demands your involvement, emotional, psychological, and whatever kind. Which means that the hours of your life, the time of your life is invested when you read. Which means that that time you can't do anything else. Like, you can't operate a machine and read at the same time. You can't give lecture and the read at I mean, uh, reading requires, or it demands, it consumes your time. Which means that most of the people who only want to read are the poor people, or this is the one extreme, they are the poor people. And whether they are rich, they don't have, I mean, they no longer have any need to do anything, so they can just sit with a cup of coffee and read. Now these people can buy lots of books, hundreds of books, and yet nothing will happen to them. They'll survive always. So ultimately it is about the survival. Now the people who are dependent on book, or who want to do something with that, but they don't have anything, so the where then the existence or the role of libraries come, you know uh, I think, I don't know like whose quote it is, but it was like, somebody said that if you want to uh, kill the civilization, just shut down the libraries. Somebody said that. I don't know who said that, but which is very true, right? While I was I was initiated into reading, I really don't know anything about the publishing culture, nothing. So I had two public libraries in my Nagpur, but where they asked us to fees, like yearly fees of some 3 or 400 rupees in 2008. That too I did not have, and because of that I did not join that. And they were far from my home also, and they were dusty libraries. They were the libraries which were not updated. Now, because government can't, they don't believe on libraries anymore. So that was the out of the question, to enrich or enhance the quality of this library. Now, if there are good libraries within the reach of people who cannot afford to buy the books and read, if the libraries are within their reach, the libraries like yours, where variety of narratives, variety of like all kinds of people. I'm not saying one kind of history should be introduced to people. Variety of, let them choose. Let them read, let them make sense of the whole scenario. So if such kind of libraries are there within the reach of the people, and if publishers make sure that their books, the books which they think are important for, in order to create a society of readers who are going to be sensible citizen. Readers are citizen, they vote, right? So if they are sensible, they will do it sensibly. A good reader can be anybody. Like a good reader can be a good doctor, good historian, good whatever it is. If you are a good reader, you can be anything good. So but sometimes good doctor does not necessarily mean a good reader, which means that we can understand the power of reading. you know so uh, for me, publisher should make sure that some part of they should realize that one of the purposes, even though they don't seriously consider or rarely consider, that they should make sure that they should keep their books into the libraries which are there among the people. And when I say people, I'm not saying the elites. They can buy books from anywhere, around the world. But what about the people who live in slum? What about the people who live in bastis? What about the people where community is so dense? I have seen some parts of Delhi and they were like horrible. I don't like Delhi. Don't hate me for that. It's just like I was like where people would can sit and read. No, like uh, I mean, if you imagine like that, it just, and maybe like in that sense, a lot of our cities, lot of our localities are becoming like that. So we make sure that like what there is a thing called mohalla clinic in Delhi, so there should be mohalla libraries. I think it's a beautiful vision, because we are creating a generation of readers. So I think as a publisher, I mean, you guys already got a lot of books from me, and I'll make sure that like this. I mean, keeping aside the thing of transaction, like I'll make sure to like send my books in whatever capacity I can send. So I, as a publisher from particular community, I want that my stories will be read by the people in Delhi. And I don't know which readers are these, but they may be from variety of community. They may be small children, right? They may read about it. They may think about it. So I think about library and publishers and the readers in this way. Oh yes, of course. I will.
You have got lots of invitations to come visit us in
Yes, yes,
Delhi
yes,
now,
yes.
Yogesh. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I will definitely come. Yeah.
so I think it's 3:24 now. So we will sort of start to wrap up. I wanted to read one more message that has come in from Shauli, saying thank you so much, Yogesh, for your lucid thoughts. While I agree there are very big issues and it is a Herculean task in front of a biased society to change mindset and change society, I will be positive and be hopeful, because right here in this meeting there are 5 persons I know in a group of 20 who belong to the so-called dominant caste, but we are absolutely committed to an equitable society and are working very hard for it. Thank you, Yogesh, for being a shining light and inspiration. um, yeah, that was Shauli, and then other people are writing in their comments in the chat. um, I
Yes,
think Yogesh, when this pandemic is over, I would also like to say that please come and talk to our members as well in Delhi if possible. Uh,
yes, yes. Of course.
I think your voice, even in the books, it just leaps out at you. So it is very, very important for our members to also hear from you and be able to ask you stuff
Yes,
whenever time permits. Uh,
yes, sure. Thank you, Purnima. Thank you, Bhavna. Thank you, Shah. And I think Mike, Nicola, Thank you, all of you. And I will definitely, like, I mean, I had plans to come to Delhi for a lot of book things, things about books. But anyway, like, I think in this pandemic, there is something called book, which are keeping the spirit of working ahead alive. So we can't take books very lightly. They are very powerful in a sense, we sometimes even don't understand. So let's do whatever we are doing. And when I'll come to Delhi, so I'll definitely, like, I'll come.
And just one last thing, two last things. First, if you haven't already read this phenomenal book by Panthers for publication, it is Flowers on the Grave of Caste, and there are many other titles from Panthers for which are just amazing. And lastly, I want to invite everybody this evening at 7 o'clock. We have a free concert on our the Community Library Project Facebook and YouTube. In fact, we have our own members who have blossomed from young poets into rap artists who speak truth to power through their rap. They are opening the concert for us, and we have a lot of other artists. So please, all are invited. And on that note, thank you very much to everybody who joined, and thank you especially Yogesh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye
See
bye.
you. Bye. Bye.